Happy Monday, everyone, and welcome to a very special edition of Richard Skipper Celebrates. Who or what are you celebrating today? I am so excited about today's guest. It's been a while, actually, since I sat down and interviewed someone one on one. Don't think of this as an interview, think of it as a conversation. But for those who don't know, an interview. Uh, this past month, I was given the great honor of appearing in Goldie DeVere's Christmas show, her holiday show. And that evening, they were raising money for St. Jude's. And I raffled off an opportunity for someone to come on the show and to sit down and chat with me. And this lucky woman won the contest. And our paths have crossed a lot through cabaret, but this is the first time that you and I are actually sitting down and having a face-to-face conversation.
Yes. And what a lovely face it is, Mr. Skipper.
And yours too, and I love the hair.
I love your hair.
We've earned it, folks.
We
We've
certainly
earned it.
have.
So, I always begin my shows by asking who or what are you celebrating today, or what have you celebrated today?
I thought about that because I've seen you before, and I am celebrating, and I know it's a cliche, but health, good health. Because if we don't have it, I wouldn't be here, and I wouldn't be able to get on that subway and run up and down the steps and go and just feel good about waking up in the morning. And thank God I always celebrate health. Health for me, health for you, health for my sister, my niece, my nephews, my family, my friends. I just want everybody to be healthy because then we could just do so much more and we could, keep on going. And that is, I know it's like I said, it's a cliche, but it's true.
No, it's not. Well, actually, it's not a cliche. I mean, it's one of those things, like many things in life, that we take for granted until it's no longer there.
Oh, yes. That's it exactly.
So I'm thrilled that you bring that up, and it's it's a great reminder. You've seen the show before, so you know that I begin my shows by asking a mystery question. I've got 3 cards laid out. I haven't seen them, so I have no idea where we're going to go with this.
Okay.
But pull a number 1 through 3, and let's get started.
Let's do 3.
And the question is: would you rather date someone you love or date someone who loves you? Let's go back to when you were dating.
Yes. That's a tough one. But I think I would prefer dating someone I love. I do.
Now you're currently married, am I
Yes.
right?
Yes.
How long have you been married?
I've been married. March 31st will be 23 years.
And what do you think the secret is in your relationship? Is your husband in the business at all?
No, he's a school teacher, an English school teacher, and then an administrator also later on. The secret to our marriage is he is an absolute sweetheart, an absolute easygoing kind of guy. Nothing ruffles his feathers. And I'm pretty easygoing, but I'm definitely more.
You're describing, it's so funny because my husband and I, we've been together, this year marks 35 years.
Oh, wow.
And I always say that when he gets to the pearly gates, hopefully not for a long time. But when that happens, St. Peter is going to meet him and say, "Here is your purple heart." Because when I meet friends where both partners are in this business, I always say, "How do you do it?" Because we live in a business of total uncertainty, and it's not for the squeamish. If you can't hack it, get out of the business or don't even think about going into it. Because we don't know from day to day what our lives are. It's not like any other profession.
And my husband is just the most supportive person. I mean, I could have done anything I want to do. I mean, it's unfortunate. It's only been 23 years. We always talk about the fact that, like, what would it have been when I first got married? I was 26, and that didn't last. It was only about 5 years. But what happened if had he been that first husband? I don't know. I'm glad the way it worked out though, because
Well,
these
I've
last
always said that
20
I believe that the 20s are it's like training wheels.
yes, yes.
I just go out
Definitely.
there, have a good time, meet some nice people, and learn how to do it.
Yes, yes, yes. Second time around was definitely that perfect one for me.
That's great.
Mhm.
And I'm also going to go even further back with you. And I asked for a photograph of you around 5 years old. I think you're a little
I
older. First of all, look at that face.
ah,
I mean, how old do you think you were in this
I think
picture?
I'm just about 3.
And what can you tell us about this little girl looking at her with an outside perspective of her?
Well, I'm an only child at that point. My sister isn't born yet. And I think you can see from my face, that I just and I have to reference because I see, old movies with me and my mother and my father, that I was a very loved child. My dad got married later in life. My mother at the time was also a little bit, older for that time in 1951, and I mean, that was me. I can never remember anything but being actually happy. And I know I'm very fortunate for
So
that.
you were born in Brooklyn, if I'm correct,
Correct.
and so you lived with such. I grew up in South Carolina, so I have a completely different perspective. But you lived with close proximity to New York City and the arts. Did you grow up in a household where the arts were part of the situation or the exception, outside the norm?
No, I mean, my parents were, a middle class, family, but I do remember my parents went out to nightclubs, early on before probably my sister Michelle and I were born. Um, so they had a nightlife that they loved. So they loved the city. They weren't afraid of the city. But I remember my first Broadway play. I was maybe 6 years old, and I remember going there, and I remember my parents going to see, West Side Story and My Fair Lady. So that was, and then of course in the house there was always a big record player, and we always had music. The Italian singers, as well as I remember my mother's favorite. She loved Nat King Cole. She loved Billy Eckstine. I mean, it was just so there was music, and it wasn't necessarily the arts, but we certainly had access to
Mhm.
it anytime we wanted to.
So, I mean, and for those who are too young to know about this, the stereo was a piece of furniture.
Mhm.
I mean, it wasn't just like a small record player in a corner or something. It was furniture.
Yes,
Um, and were you a television household as well?
we were.
Did you grow up watching television?
Yes.
And I'm getting to a point here. What was the point for you that spark went off and you said, "This is the world that I want to be a part of."
Um, I do remember watching TV, the Perry Como show, the any of the variety shows,
Mhm.
and when there was a girl singer, um, or any kind of a number where there was singers and dancers and everything, I was always mesmerized. I always just watched and loved, and always loved music. And I could remember also, again, my sister and I. had dinner with my parents, and afterwards we would in the kitchen, I would sing and I would perform for them, and they got the biggest kick out of it. So it was just, but it did take a while. And I remember Bye Bye Birdie, that was actually the musical that I saw, and I remember thinking, oh boy, this is something that I would love to do.
Do you know how many people in show business said it was Bye Bye Birdie? Liza Minnelli said that when she
Really?
saw Bye Bye Birdie, even though she grew up the daughter of Vincent Minnelli and
Mhm.
Judy Garland, it was seeing Bye Bye Birdie on Broadway that she said, "That's the world I have to be a part of."
Yeah. Yeah. And then when the movie came out, then because I was a little older then, and then I loved Bobby Rydell. I loved singing all those songs. I didn't look anything like Aunt Margaret, but it didn't matter. I wanted to be somebody like that.
Now, did your sister have the same inclination that you did?
Not really. No, I mean, she liked to sing. She was more a little bit more folky. She took
Mhm.
guitar lessons, and but she didn't go that path. But both my parents had nice voices, and my sister has a lovely voice also. But I was a little bit more a little theatrical. Um,
Now, when that started, were your parents encouraging, of this gift, or did they try to squash it? What was the situation? I mean,
oh,
you've already told us that you were a love child,
yes,
so
not squashing, but we really didn't take it. I mean, it wasn't like I was going to for voice lessons at um I didn't my very first voice lesson, I was already in college because that's really where I mean, I was in high school, but I went to an all-girls Catholic high school, so I played Lieutenant Joseph Cable in South Pacific. I was a bigger girl, and I always played the male parts because we were all girls, and for
Mhm.
some reason I played the male parts. But so I loved acting and I loved singing, but and they and I would sing the Ave Maria at church, and so but they just thought it was a nice thing. She has a nice voice, and she's a good little actress, but that was it. It was nothing. It was, it wasn't a career, and never thought of it about a career until I actually got to college.
And what happened?
Well, I went to Baruch College, which was not an artsy fartsy
Mm,
school by any chance.
right, yeah.
And and so I guess I had a great teacher there, and I had a wonderful advisor, and she put on some great shows. And so I was kind of like a big deal in a very, very little pond. And then what happens is you graduate and you realize that you are a very, very little, very little anything in a very big pond. And and I didn't have the confidence. I never felt like, well, I didn't go to Juilliard. I didn't go to this school. I didn't go to that school. I didn't really know music. I just wanted and kind of just stopped. Stopped at 25 years old, 25, 26 years old. I just stopped.
Was it because you, thought that this was not a career path that was realistic to you? Or what were the reasons that you decided to stop doing it?
I Yeah, I didn't have confidence. Really, I didn't have confidence. I mean, I would take some acting classes, and I would always I'd get great results from them, and people would encourage me, and then I got married. And then, although that husband was pretty supportive too, I could have really done anything I wanted, but it was more me and my confidence and my um lack of confidence, really, at the end. I was my worst enemy.
How did you find your confidence?
Years and years later, and by being in a completely different type of business, I ended up being in fashion and being in as a salesperson.
Mhm.
And what happened was, make a long story short, I trying to be a singer, I got little jobs here and there, and and I was also full size, large size, plus size, chubby. Okay. So
That's why
that,
the health is there.
and that was also, I talk about that in the show, that my voice and didn't go with what I looked like. I always had a pretty face, but then it stopped. And then it just I didn't look like the ingenue that I sounded like. And, but what happened was I did get a modeling stint. In fact, I mean, I don't think anybody would remember, but in the 80s, I did a little commercial for a string of large size women's clothing stores called Charisma. And I would do these commercials, touting the sizes 14 to 24, because I have charisma. And I was on these commercials. And so I ended up getting a modeling stint. And the modeling stint, I made some good money, and it was a whole new thing, these large size women who could be, but this is 1982, 1983.
Wow.
It was crazy. We were really ahead of our time. And then, so one day I got a job as a model in a showroom for Givenchy en plus. Mr. Givenchy himself decided to do, it was a German company actually, and decided to do a women's large size from sizes 14 to 22. And I was in his fashion show, the fashion show. And then part of our modeling stint was to then go into the showroom. And while the buyers from Bloomingdale's and Macy's, and at that time there was tons more, B. Altman's, all of them, we would model, but we would also talk about why we, as a large size woman, would wear the clothes. And I was chatting, because they were beautiful and I loved them. And the people who owned that particular company offered me a job as a salesperson. And that is how, in 1981, I started in the women's large size apparel business. And I just kept on growing and growing and growing and becoming, I went from one job to another. And then in 1992, I got the job, Jones, New York, started to do a women's large size line. And I worked for them. And then I worked for them for almost 24, 25 years.
Wow. What a great story. I mean, but I want to ask, being in that world, I mean, you are a very successful woman in this world. Were you happy as a plus size model? Obviously, you've lost the weight. I just want to know what your impetus was.
I lost the weight, gained the weight, lost the weight, gained the weight. And that was, that was my life. But yes. And then what had happened was I was married. So it was nice. I was getting like now a paycheck, and the singing just kind of fell by the wayside. It really did. And because in a way, selling was performing. I mean, I really never thought about it that way, but we'd have customers and we'd go in and I'd have to basically sell to Macy's, to Bloomingdale's, to B. Altman's, to Dillard's, to Belk, all this, all the southern stores. I would go on the road. I would do all these shows.
Did they have Belks up here?
No, they didn't. But I said Belk because when I would do the Dallas Mart, Belk would come there, or I'd go to the Atlanta Mart.
It was a big department store where I grew up.
Big department store.
Yeah, I knew it very well. Yeah.
Yes. And so I would, working all these women's large size labels, I would go Chicago, Atlanta. So in my own way, I was actually on the road. I was actually performing by selling. And I did get that adrenaline. There was no two ways about it. I did, and I was good at my job. Mm-hmm. And then when I went to Jones, though, I kind of like moved on to other things and but stayed in that whole world always. And it was great because we were making quantum leaps in the women's large size business. So I was definitely satisfied.
May I ask this question? And I hope that you'll take this, the right way.
Sure.
But you were doing this at a time where the fitness craze in the country was really taking off. Uh, Jane Fonda, Richard Simmons, Powers, all of these shows
Oh, power.
were constantly in our faces.
Mhm.
Suzanne Summer with the Thigh Master. Were you getting any blowback at all from anyone in the industry about that world? Because I know that certain artists that are plus size
Mhm.
have said that they've gotten,
Mhm.
pushback from the industry itself.
Yeah.
I'm just curious to know what that was like against that tide at that time.
Yeah. Actually, we never did because regardless of all of that was happening, it didn't make a difference. There was still that many women out there who were customers and who were fashionable and who had the money to spend. And that was our job,
Hmm.
to basically design from a designer's standpoint, not to have just moo out there, but to have actual, great looking fashion for women who were size 14 and 20. And that was our job. So we didn't really have an issue with that. If that woman went from a size 20 to went on her diet, did her thing, 9 times out of 10, she was going to come right back and be that size 20 again, unfortunately.
But don't you feel that most of the time was because of quick fad diets that they were on that was
Oh,
causing
oh,
that?
sure.
I mean, obviously, you have adopted and adapted a healthy lifestyle. Um, how did you do it?
So I basically finally just decided that I know that I would never be skinny. I would never. I mean, I was 5'7". I think now I'm 5'5". I don't know about that. What happened there? But I was 5'7", and I was always, that 200 pounds. And people would look at me and say, "Oh my God, you're not." But yes, I am, and I was, and I was able to dress well and loved clothes. So I was very lucky in that I knew how to style myself to always look, whether it was with accessories or whatever. So, but no matter what I did, no matter how many times I lost weight, it crept back. There was, and so I did, I did the pills, I did the all, I did everything that you could possibly do to like just zipper your damn mouth shut. Um, but finally, I just figured it out that, the more protein and exercise in like walking, not
Mhm.
anything crazy. Exercise, moving, not laying down and around. And then, I think just getting a little bit older and making sure that I eat the right thing most 99% of the time. And it's been this last weight loss has been, 2, 3 years, little by little by little by little by little. 2 pounds every, like, 3, you know, 3 months or something like that.
Now, you mentioned earlier that you were getting your performance adrenaline from the work that you were doing. But when did you start to branch out beyond that corporate world that you were in to um, satisfy your craving to sing or to act? When and how did that begin to happen for you?
So, in 2015, my company was sold, and I was retired. They retired me.
Mm.
So I just turned 60, and, they treated me great. So I had I understood, and so I left. But I don't think there was a second between then and sitting down watching TV at night, having dinner with my husband. And if I saw one more diabetes commercial, if I saw one more of these commercials that had women now who were 60 and over, women now who were overweight or, not perfect. And I looked at the TV one day as far from a commercial standpoint and said, why can't I do that? And that was really what, so then I started to try to really become an actress again. And I had, thank God, I had the wherewithal to be able to afford to do it at this point. I mean, I used to send out my headshots. It was a whole different world, no headshots and self-taping and all of I mean, it's a whole different, entire different world. So, but I put I said, I can do this. And I was in a good spot financially to be able to, take some classes and do it and not have to worry about working anymore. And that's what I did. And I just started to get that momentum going. I did a few print ads. I did a couple of small independent films, and I was loving it, absolutely loving it. And then I took a business course with a wonderful woman who recently passed away, Terry Saperstein. And Terry introduced me to, because then I said I wanted to start to sing again.
Well, before you go there,
okay.
I was having a conversation this morning with a very dear friend of mine, Celeste.
Oh, geez, what was going to come out of my mouth?
Yes, that's why I stopped you, because we were talking. Terry Saperstein, unfortunately, just passed away, but she was she reached out to me. I have a newsletter for those who don't know, and thank God people do read it. And she saw that you were going to be on the show today, so she called me this morning. We were talking, and she talked about the experience of you coming to sing for her. I want you to go on with your story, because she had nothing but raves about you, just to let you know that.
Well, thank you. So Terry said, I think you should see Celeste Simone. So I went to see Celeste, and I had a rude awakening also, because part of me was still that 26-year-old who wanted to sing in her not necessarily operatic voice, but in her soprano voice, and sing all these songs just like they are in the theater. And Celeste was like, no. Basically, nobody wants to hear a soprano anymore. That's it. I mean, you got to start to, we have to, like, now you're 60. Now I think I was 62 then, 62 years old. We have to start to, make it, you have to start to sing appropriately. You could still sing, and so we started working. And then at one point, she said, all right, I think that's enough with me and you. I think I want to introduce you to, she actually, yes, to Lina Koutrakos.
Lina Koutrakos.
And so she said, Lina has this wonderful workshop on Saturday mornings. It's an advanced class of cabaret singers. And I was like, cabaret, I don't, I didn't know. So I audited that class that morning. And at least I was able to sing. And I remember, actually, I can't remember what song I sang, but I sang a song, and Lina said, well, if you want to come back, you can come back. And so
at that time, you knew nothing about the world of cabaret.
Oh my God, nothing. Absolutely nothing. Other than just cabaret singers, that they,
Lina was my first director, by the way, as well.
I just have like a little star that is following me and saying, okay, this is the person you should be with, and then this is the person you should be with. And so I was very, very fortunate. And hit it off also, and the people, her other students, they're not students, her other singers were, I have to say, one, more supportive and a wonderful community like I have never experienced before. It just so open, and it was great. So I immediately felt the love, so to speak. And then of course, then we had a few classes, and then pandemic hits, and then we're doing Zoom classes, and we did that obviously for a long time. But I learned a lot. And you learn a lot from other singers too.
Absolutely.
Absolutely.
Absolutely. Uh, I mean, as this was all happening, did you, once you became aware of what cabaret is, did you start attending other shows
Yes.
to get a sense of the show?
Yes. Yes.
Who were some of the artists that began to make an impact on you to the point where you're going to move from being a student to being on stage? And I'm getting a little bit of a feedback there. I don't know what just happened.
Oh, should I get a little closer?
No, well,
Oh.
I'm getting a little feedback from myself, not you.
Oh, okay. Okay. I'm trying to think, who obviously I went to some of the shows, of some of the people, but I remember seeing Karen Mason actually. And I loved her. And then actually, it's so funny that, when I was when I was single between husbands, I used to listen to Nancy Lamotte.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
And then I meet, and I mean, I bought the, I guess it was CDs, bought,
Yes.
bought Nancy CDs because I think I was listening to Jonathan Schwartz. He used to have that Saturday
That's right.
afternoon, and he introduced me to, and so I became very aware of Nancy and those kinds of singers because of Jonathan Schwartz. So when I got into Lina's class, and then found out that she was actually a personal friend of Nancy, I felt like this was all meant to be, because now
Synchronicity.
she's mentioning people that I was listening to, and even though I didn't think of me singing that way, but I enjoyed it so much. So so Karen Mason, and then I had actually went to see Liz Calloway, and then and Ann Campton Calloway, and then I started to see the people in my class. Joanne Halev, I got to see Joanne's show, and I loved it. And then of course it was just, but I didn't see anybody who like sang like me. And I thought, okay, and that was one of the things, like everything I sang was very, very high, and we were starting to come down and take them down to different keys,
Mhm.
keys that I hadn't sung before in, and I wasn't that comfortable doing it. But 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 the world of songs that Lina and the class would throw at me just became, it was just great. And in my show, I mean, I have those kinds of songs, but of course I use still a lot of my Broadway tunes, but I'm singing them differently than I ever would have before.
Where did the impetus for the show that you are now doing, which we're going to get to, happen? Was that an idea that came from knowledge that Lina had about you, or when in your mind did you start forming the
Mhm.
show, this story,
Mhm.
which I think is a fascinating story? I have to tell you, because this is where my brain goes. I thought that your father was an editor
Oh, no.
or working in the Simon and Schuster or Random House, And then as I'm reading, I'm going, no.
No, Richard. No.
Interesting,
Mhm.
incredible story. When
Mhm.
and how did that idea come about?
You know, obviously, when we were in class, before every song that we would sing, there would be, I didn't even know the word patter until I got to a cabaret class. So there would be patter. And I just think I was in the living room, um and I thought of one of the songs that my father loved, which was "My Love Forgive Me," which is it's English and Italian, and it was by Jerry Vale, but who made the big hit was actually Robert Goulet. That was the big hit. So I never singing Italian songs, I thought this was the one song that my father loved to hear, and he would love for me to sing, and I never sang it. So I found it. Actually, I asked Michael Levine if he
Ah,
had it, and he did. And then so I had it, and so that's how I started. I started the patter was when I was 10, this song was playing on the record player in our apartment. And for whatever reason, that I went from writing a 15-page story from when I was 10 to when I was 46. And I just kept on writing, 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 writing. And then every time I would have my Saturday class, um, I would tell a story from the story and then say, how would this song work with that? Does that make sense? And so really the story came first and then the songs just went into, and then really a lot of it was being in class and my fellow classmates saying, "Oh my God, that works. Oh my God, that doesn't work," or something like that. And so it really became, and and the more enthusiastic they became, the more enthusiastic I became.
do you consider yourself a writer? Have you?
No, 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 not at all. But I will say, my husband, who is an English teacher, he'd say to me, "Do you have any idea how well this is written?" I'd be like, "Well, I actually like flunked out of English in college." So, but and he would say things to me like, I would say to him, just look at the grammar of it. Just does it make, he said, "Yeah, but you wouldn't say it that way." He said, "I would say it that way. You need to say it the way you would say it." And that's how, and really that's how it came to. I'm shocked that it went from where it from "My Love Forgive Me," and just wanting to pay a little bit homage to my dad, to one more thing I will tell you that
There
I
comes a moment, excuse me, there comes a moment, and I know with my upcoming show where you go, "Oh my God, why didn't I think about this? This is exactly where I need to be. This is exactly what I need to do, and I need to tell this story."
Mhm.
I know that you said you started out with this song, but when did it come to you? There's going to be a whole show, and it's going to be a celebration of my dad.
It was probably at the end when I was actually finished with it and I read it and I thought, okay, I'm going to do this and I'm going to do it, and it's for my dad and it's for my mother and it's for my sister and it's for me. Like, I enjoyed it so much. I enjoyed writing it, and I would do these things. I would call my sister was hysterical because she would say, "I don't want to know anything about it. I want to be completely surprised." But then I'd have to call her up and go and say, "Now, I'm not telling you anything, but did daddy do this or did mom do this? And do you remember just," and she would give me like a little, "Yes, that happened." And then she'd hang up. So I'd be like, "Oh,
I
yeah."
love it.
But it was great. So it was a complete surprise to her, and really it was Ed, my husband Eddie, and the class kind of knew what was going on. But when I was all done with it, I mean I never imagined, like, I just thought I'd do the one show, and then I did two, and then I
Mhm.
did three, and then I did four. that I did 5. And now I'm going to do, well, I'm doing 5 and I'm doing 6, the 27th and I never in imagine.
I
I
cannot
didn't
wait.
think
I
I
am
could.
so excited about seeing this. You have no idea. Excuse me. As you were writing this, were you thinking along the same lines of what songs would go into the show and the placement of those songs, or did a lot of that come from Lina?
Both. I mean, Lena definitely helped me with a couple of with more than a couple. I like I said, if I came into with something like there's a part of the show where I talk about dancing with my father, and I must have had 2 or 3 different songs, and every time they were like, no, and she said, "What about Luther Vandross's song, Dance with My Father?" And I was like, me singing a Luther Vandross song? Like, I was like, "No." I remember going home and thinking, "No, I'm not gonna do that. I'm not even gonna try that. How can I sing a Luther Vandross song?" Well, needless to say, that song is in the show. And then actually Lena picked the last 2 songs, Lena picked for me. Um, so it's that's why it's a team effort. And Gregory Toroian, my musical
Musical
director,
director, yeah.
uh just was the cherry on the top, because I would go to him and bring a lot of theater songs, and and he put me in my place and said, "Okay, I get it, but let's try it this way and let's try it that way." Or, "Elvira, this has been done umpteen times. Let's do it your way. Your way, but our way." And some of these arrangements are in some of these songs. Something's Coming, I do, and the arrangement is just beautiful. I mean, some of these songs we've heard ad nauseum, but I hope that
But we haven't heard you do them.
but you haven't heard me do.
Liza Minnelli once said that for her, what she loves the most about this business is what happens in the rehearsal room. She's being on stage is great and it's exciting, but and I know for myself, I mean, with my upcoming show, I have an incredible director, a musical director, and when we get together in a rehearsal studio or in our living rooms and we start bouncing ideas around, there's nothing like it. What has the collaborative process been like for you working with Lina and Gregory? And they have a great, rich history together as well.
Mhm. It's been terrific. I mean, you are not, I mean, you might be up there at the end on your own, but the support that you feel behind you, that's kind of like invisible. Nobody else is seeing that, but it's there. And when I say there's no way I could have been on that stage without Lina and Gregory, that is to my parents. I swear on them. There's no way. From the confidence, from the creativity, from the expertise, everything that, I brought the least to it, to tell you the truth. When
Well,
all was
well,
said and done, I brought the story, and then so the 3 of us just, I know, put something special together.
did you start putting this together during the pandemic, or did this all? I mean, did the
No,
actual?
it was after the pandemic. It Once I did it, it kind of, but I remember it took like about a year, all in all, because I remember telling my sister that, yeah, I was starting to write this, and in fact, I said to her, because I remember as a teenager all of a sudden being very going to my father and saying, "Dad, I think I should write a story about you. I think I should, tell your story." Well, I think that was probably the angriest my father ever got at me. He thought it was the worst idea in the world to obviously do something like that. basically, what the hell are you talking about? You're not going to tell everybody about what we do. And I was like, but so at one point I said to my sister, I kind of like, I don't know if I had a dream, but I thought, you think Daddy's mad at me because I'm finally telling this story? And when we thought, I said, I think the statute of limitations has definitely,
How do you think that he would react to this show?
well, that's and I thought about that. Well, first of all, I think it's it's a sweet show, and it certainly is nothing derogatory about my dad's business, about the guys in the business. It's not, it's not a Godfather or a what, it's not anything like that, but this was his job, and some of these people he did definitely associate it, but he was
Did you meet these characters in your home?
Oh, sure. Some of them, of course we did. But my father was also very, very protective of his girls, which was my mother and his daughters. So there was never any encouraging, even as we got to be teenagers, we had to go to school. We had to make a life better than theirs was. I mean, it was not anything that we weren't allowed to go to bars. If we walked into a restaurant and there was a bar there, like we were supposed to go right smack to the restaurant part.
So obviously your dad had an unusual profession. Let's
Yes.
just go there.
Yes.
At what point in your life did you realize that your father was doing something different from maybe what your friends were doing, dads were doing?
Pretty much immediately, because I don't know in South Carolina, but when we were kids, you would have to we had nuns, and you would have to tell the nuns or the school what your father did for a living. It was like on a piece of paper, and I could remember, like, literally going to my mother and say, "What does Daddy do?" And then my mother would say, "What are we writing down?" Talking to my dad.
Well,
And
I was going to ask. I mean,
yeah.
what would he put down on an application for something?
Yeah. Well, first of all, there was not a lot of applications for anything. We owned nothing. So we didn't own a home. My mother didn't have a checking account. Everything was cash.
Mhm.
Or a money order. There were
Mhm.
money orders. You were able to make money orders. So there was none of that. So when I remember one year he works for Williams Candy Company. Okay. And I knew enough not to say, well, what does he do for Williams Candy Company? Didn't even think to ask. I go, okay, it's Williams Candy. I mean, we knew he wasn't a plumber. We knew he wasn't a tailor. We knew he wasn't a doctor or a lawyer. But and I talk about that in the show. Nothing was unusual in our home.
Well, I wrote a one-man show a couple of years ago, and my sister, she said, "Be careful what you put on stage." What was your sister's reaction when you first went to your sister and said, "I'm going to tell this story"? Because she didn't know what direction you were going to go with this.
No. But you knew enough when I would ask her the certain things. She knew which way I was going,
But I mean that first time that you told her that this is something you were thinking of.
Yeah, she loved it. She was totally supportive. And I guess the bottom line was there wasn't really anything ever that was horrible to actually talk about. There really wasn't. And so they were always kind of just funny anecdotes kind of things that like I said, we just were used to. Kids went on vacation. My first plane ride was to Miami, then to Vegas. That's we were they weren't going, our friends weren't going to Vegas and Miami. So but we just didn't think anything of it. I don't know how else to explain it, that it just was part of our DNA, and nobody made a big deal about it. And it was just totally acceptable. And no one put us down for it either. I mean, my mother might have gotten a little, maybe some stares from the other Catholic moms at church, but my mother was a force to be reckoned with. She didn't give a you know what. So it was
So,
fine.
what was the experience like for your sister when she saw the finished product?
Okay. So she has been to every single show and she will be there in the next two shows. I almost at one point I couldn't, well, I didn't see her, but I could hear her sobbing throughout the entire thing.
Wow.
She that I I could hear her sobbing on the funny parts as well as the sadder parts. And she just was hysterical. And I think it was the fourth show, she's still sobbing. So
Is there anything that you learned
you'll
about
meet
your
her,
dad?
Richard.
Is there anything that you learned about your dad from this process that you'd never thought about before until you actually started putting this on stage?
That's a good question. I think it just validated what I always knew, that my sister and I were very, very fortunate. We were brought up um, in a home that was just filled with love. I mean, I've said it on Facebook sometimes. When Valentine's Day comes, I think Valentine's Day, I see my father with three hearts of chocolates in his hand. One big red one for my mother and two pink ones for his daughters.
Oh,
That
that's
is my dad.
wonderful.
That
Wow.
was my dad.
And
And
did he have any brothers and sisters?
oh, yes, yes, he had two sisters and, three brothers, and they adored him. He was like the favorite brother, I think. I mean, my other uncles were great too, but they were also, and that was the other thing, they had a great family. And so, you see that. You see brothers and sisters loving one another and him loving his parents. So you saw that. My mother had only a brother, and she adored her brother. So if my sister and I ever fought, it upset my dad. I mean, how do you do that? How do you fight with your sister? Or so they came from loving. My father came from a loving family. So it was so we just kind of knew that.
And are any of your aunts and uncles still around? And
No, no one's around. But it was great. My cousins, all of my cousins from those aunts and uncles came to the shows.
oh, that's
So
wonderful. So,
that
I
was
mean, what a
that was
great,
great.
Elvira, what a great legacy to your dad to be able to create this.
Yeah, I think he'd be very happy. In his later life, I would sing every time a friend or somebody got married, I would sing, or even if I didn't know who they were, they would ask me to sing Ave Maria. And he was ailing then, but he would take his cane, and the church was just a block away from his house, and he would, and that's my other vision of him. He would come in and sit in the pew, and I would do my Ave Maria, and he'd turn around and he'd look up at me and he would just listen to me. So he loved me singing. So I think he'd be very, very happy.
And congratulations, the reviews, the response has been absolutely incredible for you. Do you see a life with this show beyond? I know you've got two upcoming performances. I'm going to be there on the 1st, everyone. I wanted to be there on the 27th, but I can't.
That's
But I'm going to be there on the 1st. Anyone who wants to join me, we'll get a party. We'll go to Joe Allen's afterwards. We'll have a great night. So where do you want to go after this with this? I mean, with this show, do you see taking this show beyond Don't Tell Mamas?
Well, I think Scott Barbarino said something about that he thought it was like kind of like a theater piece almost. This girl with Moxie from Brooklyn. and a few other people thought that it had legs, I guess. So so I thought, well, let's see what happens. Maybe, I don't know, maybe Chicago. I know the other cabaret areas like St. Louis and Chicago, maybe there's an outlet there. My friend Ann Talman just came back with her fabulous show
Oh,
about
incredible.
Elizabeth Taylor,
Taylor.
The Shadow of Her Smile. From, I think, a place in Delray,
Delray
maybe?
Beach.
Yes, yes. So, I mean,
Delray Beach Playhouse.
yes. So it might be fun to do that. And I don't know how, I don't know. I don't know how people out of New York. But to be honest, I have a house up in the Poconos, and my sister lives up there like 50% of the time. And she has this whole wonderful Pennsylvania group of teachers and friends. And I can't tell you how many of them who have nothing to do with the city have come to see the show and are also, they have totally different lives, a little bit more rural life, and they are loving the show. So you never know.
Absolutely. Well, the one lesson that I hope that everyone gets from today is step out of your comfort zone and do it. I mean, you're living it. I mean, you're absolutely living it. And I can't believe this, but this hour flew for
Oh
me.
my God, already.
Yes, and I want you to promise me that you will come back on the show sometime.
I would love to. You
No,
are a doll.
I'm going to give my closing remarks, and then I'm going to give you the final word today. And it could be about anything that we spoke about that you want to build upon, anything that we didn't talk about that you wish we had, or just any message that you want to leave everyone with. And when you say goodbye, I will end the show so you don't have to worry about how do I get out of here.
Okay.
I'll take care of that. But I want to thank everybody for showing up. I know that I can speak for Elvira when I say this. Those of us who do what we do, we don't take it lightly when you show up. So thank you for being here. Thank you for attending Elvira's shows. And please leave a comment on the YouTube channel. Share this, because what that will do is that will increase the ranking of the video and how it shows up in search engines. So any of you who can do that, absolutely do that. I end all of my shows with the same message. I ask everyone to go out and do something nice for somebody else without expecting anything in return. What I want all of you, and including you, Elvira, and I want you to report back to me after you do this, I want you to go to your Facebook friends list, and I want you to reach out to the 8th friend that pops up and reach out with a phone call.
Okay.
Not an email message, not a text message, not a private inbox message, a phone call. And let that person know the impact that they're making on your life. And by doing so, what you're going to do is you're going to make an impact on their life. I have a dear friend. He says we're all in the same storm, but we're in different size boats. And I always say, I don't care what size boat you're on, as long as you have a skipper by your side. And with that, I'm going to leave, and it's all yours. And I just can't wait to see the show. And thank you for being here. It's all yours.
Well, I just want to tell everyone that, first of all, the people who have come to the show and the people who are coming and the people who can't make it, it's okay. You guys have been more supportive than I could have ever imagined. But the most important thing is anyone who is even thinking, who has a germ of an idea to do anything, even if it's to go out and ice skate when they've never ice skated before, do it. Just do it. Time is of the essence, and time is fleeting. And I'm going to be 70 years old this year. What the hell? I am doing that plus more. Thank you, everyone. Mwah!